Good morning, good day, good night. Hope you have a wonderful holiday season which is coming. And thank you so much for dialing the last episode of BioVerse. They were science sparks the businesses in medicines. Today is my great pleasure to have my two good friends and also fellow editors of Asian Biotechies working to the bar. They, I would say, increasingly popular newsletter in Science We Trust community, ISWT community. We publish our newsletter every week. I thought that would be a great opportunity for three of us to share our, kind of a summary and a review of what has happened in 2024 in the industry of biotech. Without further ado, let me first tell the new audience who probably dial in the first and second time with us, tell you a little bit about where BioVerse come from and what's the relationship between us and ISWT community and other two co-organizers. Let me share the screen with everyone and Angus and Jiamin, please give me a thumb up if you can see the screen fairly well. Perfect. All right, like I said today, it's three of us. We are the editors of ISWT communities, Asian Biotechies, working to a bar newsletter. So today is kind of the title, the hybrid of a BioVerse and our newsletter. We call ourselves Asian Biotechies Review 2024 in biotech. Let's dive into who we are. The BioVerse, where science sparks the business in medicine. It's really produced by three leading nonprofit in the US. The first one is ourselves, ISWT community. Second one is the SAPA GP, which is the China American Pharmaceutical Professionals Association, Great Philly chapter. The last, but definitely not the least, the BioSpark, which is a Boston-based biotech nonprofit with the members around the world. That's who we are. And then today, probably without too much need to introduce the speakers, but still, let's give a quick introduction. I'll let the speakers say a few words about themselves, and then we can dive into the content today. So how about Angus? A few words about yourself? Angus, you mute yourself. You mute yourself.
Sorry about that. Hello, everybody. This is Angus Liu. I'm a deputy editor with Fierce Pharma. We're one of the largest biopharmaceutical news publication here in the US. I'm here. I've been here for about 8 years now, and currently in charge of our oncology coverage. Thank you. Glad to be here.
Jiamin?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Nice to be here. My name is Jiamin Zhuo. I'm currently a director in Global Strategy Insight team at EMD Serono. My background, I have a PhD in neuroscience, then moving to industry, consulting, Wall Street equity research, and big pharma, small biotech, mainly in the market insight and new plot planning, early commercial strategy work. Great to be here.
Fantastic. So definitely the least and the last, myself, Leon Tang, PhD by training, like Jiamin, I could research before, BD through and through in the past 4.5 years, and also the co-founder of ISWT community and one of the three editors, as the two of my friends mentioned, of the Asian Biotechies working to the bar newsletter published every week. And also as a housekeeping, I say people are trickling in. Today's format going to be started with about, I would say 45 to 50 minutes of presentation, really share our view, the review of what happened. And then we're going to leave another 5 minutes in the very end for Q&A. However, if you do have a question today, please do put your question in the Q&A box in your screen instead of putting the chat. We probably would not take a look at there because of all those hustle bustle. And with that being said, let's dive right into today's content. Let's review 2024. Even there's still are 2 more weeks of what happened in this year. And this is the bullet points and the sessions we're going to cover today. We start with the top trends in 2024. And then give a little bit in-depth analysis by key catalysts and news. And then probably the most important one, in our opinion, to the audience in the call today. On the call today is a review of China outbound deals, and finally we share a few words about our vision of 2025. Let's dive right in. The first top trend of 2024. This is really kind of from the review presentation by Alex Venture a few weeks ago. From that one, if you can see the chart, the graph on the left really uses this word cloud. You can see 3 words really stood out from this year: obesity, China, immunology, are the top topics 2024. By the way, we can always refer to the newsletter we publish relate to those top trend or top relevant news and topics. You can probably see those issues number and publication date. We refer here for people who have not subscribed to our newsletter. This is a great opportunity for you to have a glimpse of what 3 of us have written in the past 1.5 years. We also welcome you to subscribe, take a look at what we have written and what we will be writing. So generally speaking, definitely obesity, China, immunology are the top of the list from the review by Alex Venture. We probably can dive into the 3 top topics one by one. The first one is obesity. Obesity. I'll start with some quick word and then pass the baton to Angus and Jiamin. Obesity, right now, kind of quite clear. There's a consensus. There's going to be a market with a peak sale probably around $120 billion. That's going to be absolutely the biggest disease area or like a market ever in innovative drug space since this market exists many years ago. And obviously there's a furious competition led by 2 mega companies, Eli Lilly and Novo Nordisk. And the interesting thing we learned from the recent presentation by Alex is really they think there's quite a bit of similarity between obesity and statin, which is another mega blockbuster drug class many years ago, and the peak in the early 2000s. The one thing I learned from the comparison from the presentation that the first to market mover advantage is not that clear if you use a statin drug class as a kind of historic reference, because if you look at the presentation slides on the right, you can see the best-selling drug during statin decades of run is not necessarily first one getting to market. It's the Lipitor from Pfizer. So that's pretty much give people a little bit hint what obesity market could be in the future. Yes, Lilly and Novo are still ahead, but would they be still the clear like front runner in the future? It's not like written on the stone yet. So now I'll stop here. I know one of us also put the newsletter below. Anything you want to comment?
Yeah, that was me. I did that. I just wanted to, I think I agree with this is Angus, by the way. I agree with the Atlas Ventures putting obesity first in this hot topic roundup. I wanted to go back to this Evaluate 2024 World Preview report that we also covered when it came out around June, July. It included a 2030 sales projection for drugs, and we're kind of expected, but we're still a little bit surprised to see how further behind the traditional oncology drugs will fall. Instead, like Keytruda, because of its patent expiration in 2028, its 2030 sales, which slid to number 9 by 2030, is projected to slide to number 9 by 2030. And instead, those obesity drugs, diabetes and obesity drugs by Novo Nordisk and Eli Lilly, Ozempic, Wegovy, CagriSema. CagriSema is, for those of you who are not familiar, is a combination of semaglutide and the amylin analog, cagrilintide. Those 3 Novo drugs and the 2 tirzepatide Lilly drugs, Mounjaro and Zepbound, they will together have more than $100 billion sales, projected to have 100 billion sales by 2030. And I was quite impressed and amused a little by the words that EValuate used. It says 100 billion may not be the ceiling. So there could be more coming. So, and also coming to the most valuable R&D projects, also from the EValuate report, CagriSema was leading the way with several other weight loss drugs, weight loss candidates. This includes Lilly's Triple G, retatrutide, and Amgen's Maritide. So we can see that this area is growing extremely fast, and you can see the chart by Atlas Venture here. Like in 2014, we had 4 drugs, but it was only a $1 billion market. In 2024, just the Lilly and Novo, those two, semaglutide and tirzepatide combined, these two combined had already 16 billion sales in 2024. And Leon, if you could move the slide, please. Yeah, and all of these sort of enthusiasm around the obesity drugs kind of also created some of the most dramatic market movements in 2024. And some of them we have also, our newsletter, the Insights We Trust Community newsletter has already also covered them. This include most memorable one when Eli Lilly surprisingly missed its sales target, the tirzepatide, 2 tirzepatide drugs, missed the third quarter consensus expectation by a combined $1 billion. And that day, Lilly's stock price dropped dramatically and wiping like 50 billion or more from its market cap. So that was sort of people were starting to wondering whether the demand was really sustainable, but really some of the analysts later say, digging into the data was more like it is still like Lilly couldn't make enough, couldn't manufacture enough of the drugs. That was the cause, but not the underlying demand. And we've also seen things like the Viking, very dramatic Viking data release. It first like shot up 10% after their data release, and then fell as analysts kind of started to question whether Viking can make enough of its drug to really, especially at the highest dose. If you can't make enough, you're still not going to be a major player here. So that was kind of a dramatic turn that day for Viking. And then, of course, there's Amgen. It was just so dramatic, ups and downs for its Maritide. So this is we're going to see. I think this also partly reflects how people still don't fully understand the obesity market and what really matters in the data. So we'll just continue to see some of the dramatic turns in the obesity market. So enough about obesity. Next thing is about, Leon, if you could move the slides. It's about China. I think Leon will say more about this in his session. What I want to say is just this is you don't need a calculator to tell you that there's a lot of China deals going on. So there are several of them, very prominent one. I think the landmark one is AstraZeneca and Gracell. The acquisition of Gracell was kind of a landmark event. And also there has been a lot of deal making, not necessarily straight out acquisition, but in licensing deals in the billions of dollars. Very encouraging sign for cross-border transactions with Chinese companies. Of course, there are some uncertainties, including biosecure. I think the one thing with biosecure, a few things I would like to say is there were once some concerns whether this would cover the biotech, would spread to the biotech industry. I think based on my interview with some of the legal experts there, the chances are very low. it will be restricted to kind of the service, the CDMOs, the CXOs industry for now. Just because, if you're keeping drugs away from Americans, that is a big no-no in the US. So you can't really keep the drug developers themselves from the US markets. So it's an easier target to go after some of the manufacturers. And we all kind of noticed that the Biosecure Act was left out of the defense bill at the end of the year, but still the act is still, we can't say that the bill is dead at this point. There's still many chances, other alternative routes that this one could come back later, even this year or next year. It's just going to be harder for them to come back. So a little bit on, despite some of the geopolitical tensions, I think just in terms of transactions, we will still see a lot of these deal making with China, and we'll continue to probably see that going forward. Leon, if you could move the slide, please. Yes, immunology, interesting thing is Fierce Pharma, the publication that I work for, we recently launched Fierce Oncology, an oncology newsletter. Interestingly, our first issue in the subject line, one of the topic was a bunch of cancer biotechs pivoting to immunology. So this is an interesting thing. I think we've all seen this for a while, and even in that evaluate or preview report, like I said, oncology sort of went to the bottom, even behind immunology, like Dupixent and also Skyrizi from AbbVie. These two are supposed to get higher sales than Darzalex and Keytruda by 2030. So immunology has an even bigger spots on the drug sales by 2030 list per evaluate. So we've seen Brooke Booth also at Let's Venture also has a few points on this, like immunology. It is hot. It is getting a lot of traction these days, but it also getting a little bit competitive. Like there are 24 targets with over 10 programs in development, and a lot of them are trying to be the next Dupixent, like a pipeline in the drug. And we've seen a lot of M&A deals as well. Here you can see on the slides, we have over $40 billion combined in M&A in the last 2 years. We could think of some of them. This includes GSK buying Iolis at the beginning of the year. I think the Chinese audience know this pretty well. Many people have been ridiculing Hengrui because the product was actually a long-acting TLZP antibody for asthma, was actually originally coming from Hengrui. And there was also some of the other, in recent years, we've seen several deals, including like Merck buying Prometheus, Roche buying Telavant, and then this year we have AbbVie and FutureGen, which is a Chinese company. All these 3 deals focused on TL1A. Just speaking to some of the hot targets that are still really competitive, everybody trying to buy into them. So back to the topic of some of the oncology biotechs trying to become immunology drug developers. It's kind of easier for some of the immuno-oncology companies. Like we've seen this year, Cullinan Oncology, it became Cullinan Therapeutics. So it can shift from oncology to sort of immunology. Another one, very notable one, is Nkarta. They developed CAR NK cells. They also pivot from oncology to immunology. Part of this shift was fueled by this round of shift. Many companies shift was fueled by CAR T and T cell engagers targeting some of the B cell malignancies, lupus, and other similar diseases. I think the warning sign, we sort of already see this field becoming overall very overly crowded, becoming very crowded. And even I think companies will need to think twice. Like if you are pivoting from a crowded place to another crowded place, what's the point? You have to really think carefully before you make that pivot. Is your target immunology? Is it even that easier than oncology these days? So we've also seen some deals here as well, like the debut of Candid Therapeutics by Kensong with 370 million Series A and 2 assets from China, CD20 and BCMA, working on those T-cell engagers. So we've definitely seen some big deals and big biotechs emerging from this immunology rush, a gold rush. So I think this might continue, but there is also the possibility, given the incoming Trump administration, there is, based on what I've heard just this morning from the Eli Lilly CEO, David Ricks, who was recently at that lunch or dinner with Trump. Cancer is going to be, he said, David Ricks said, that oncology, treating cancer is going to be one of the hot topics of under the Trump administration, similar to the Cancer Moonshot program that the Democratic administration has developed. So we'll just see if the pendulum will swing back to oncology or if it's going to stay in immunology. And there's apparently some criticism voiced, very subtle, but criticism voiced against the FDA, like there needs to be some regulatory changes. So we have seen some of the FDA being a little bit tough on some of the oncology side, not always very in accordance with the industry, not always acting as what the industry would want it to be. So we'll just have to see what that will shape out, whether that will change the immunology of in the next few years. All right, Leon, I think those are all my points. Back to you.
I'm going to just quickly pass to Jiamin. Jiamin, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Yeah, Angus already talked about many big themes. I think I would just want to provide summary in the last year on some of the key articles I have focused on. Next slide, please. So first of all, I'm really interested in the CGT area. So one thing is, this is the IQVIA report regarding the CGT in the early of this year. One thing very clear is from this figure, if you see the orange line represents China's CGT trials, you can see there's a huge jump from 2008 until to around 2020. There is increasing from 10% share all of the world now to around 40, leading the world in the CGT trials initially in China. Represents a booming, but also represents a pressure, as Angus just mentioned. Most of these CGT are actually from CAR-Ts and depends on the target. If you are really using your target CD19, CD20s, these companies definitely facing very heated competition and try to find a way to differentiate. At the same time, and if you see the bottom right figure, even though in China we have so many CGT trials going on, you see the blue bar, the light blue bar showing how many clinical sites, hospitals has experience in CGT trials. And then the dark one represents the CAR T-cell accredited center, which means, you have reimbursement, commercial approval to really provide commercial CAR T service. In China, there is a very small number. I don't believe, number 5 should be probably updated for now, but overall, there's a huge difference in the development of the CGT in China versus the commercialization of the CGT cell therapy, especially in China. And that holds a very, I think, big challenges, especially in China for all the CGT biotech companies, how to make their product onto the market or get revenue is a huge question for them and for their investors. That does cause lots of stress. Next slide, please. Yeah, on a larger scale, in the global stage, CGT in 2024 has achieved several key milestones. We have put this news in our newsletter. For example, the first TIL was approved in early this year. That is a tumor-inflating leukocytes, which using tumor's own tissue to really train all these leukocytes to treat the patient's individualized, personalized trial, clinical trial, and to provide this kind of therapeutic treatment for these tumor patients. However, of course, it comes to its own challenges. It's a personalized treatment. It takes a long time. But so far, good news is I think the company has reported around 40 million sales already in the Q3, and they are really looking forward in 2025 around 500 million sales. Of course, that's a long shot, but I would say at least the TIL's approval does provide enough return as expected for the first year. It's not that bad. Other things like TCR-T is also another important modality approved in cell therapy. It's using, instead of like CAR-Ts, they use TCR receptors, which allow this therapy to bind not only at the cell surface targets, but also into the targets inside the cell, which significantly expanded the target possibility for this treatment for tumor. But it also comes for pay its own price. For example, they have to be HLA matching, to find the patient eligible for the TCR-T, and usually HLA matching will only achieve around 20% maximum in all these tumor patients. So that is a large limitation. And currently, Immunology, the first TCR-T approved developer, reported in their Q3 earnings call that there's only one patient so far move into the process to get the treatment. So they haven't generated any revenue yet. And that is going to be still a big challenges for the company. I think the most important news we see this year, representative of all the CGT challenges, is from BioMarin. They are Roctavian, the first and only approved hemophilia A gene therapy at the time, launched in Germany in 2023, and however, in early 2024, almost a year after launch, they only generate 3.5 million income. 3 patients were treated. This is actually the first, I think, gene therapy has been approved for non-rare disease. Before, we always hear, gene therapy approved is mainly for a very small niche area with almost no other potential effective treatment. And this one in hemophilia A, one challenge, unique challenge BioMarin start to see is because in this space, they already have pretty good, decent treatment, likely monthly injection or even several months once injection to maintain the patients in a relatively healthy status. So that give a very high barrier for any physician or patients agree to use this novel gene therapy, especially given there's very limited long-term safety data. You don't know if this gene therapy potentially could cause any problem in the long run. And as we know, in some of these, I believe it's birth drugs, there are some problems in the long run, potentially causing cancers in some of the patients, especially children treated. So there is a big worry regarding the long-term safety of the gene therapy, which we can reflect in BioMarin's gene therapy launch. They do have face a very challenging place here. And I think if you can go to the next slides. Yeah, I think I already talked about many challenges all these cell therapy CGTs facing, but there are still good news coming along the way. Especially I think in regenerative cell therapy, we do see key players in a very novel, more general indications now moving into pivotal trial. Big ones like on the right, Vertex, we all know that they have spent lots of money in the stem cell therapy for type 1 diabetes. They use stem cell technology, try to reproduce islet cell and put into type 1 diabetes, given that we know those patients have problem to produce functional islet cell for themselves. And now in the first phase 1-2 trial, they already prove enough safety and some encouraging data. Many patients after treatment has reached they call insulin independence. But I still need to say these are first generation stem cell therapy. All these patients still need to take immunosuppressant drugs to make sure that their own body will not digest or kill all these allo cell therapy. So this is still in first generation, but now Vertex, I think, just recently announced that they're moving into pivotal stage. And this is a big news for type 1 diabetes patients. This is the first time a scalable potential cure move into a pivotal trial. And that could potentially really change the dynamic in the treatment for type 1 diabetes, given that we know diabetes is a big market and so many people have to take lifetime drug treatment. Now there is hope, even though I know this is still a very limited first generation assets require you to take an immunosuppressant for a long time, but this is hope. And I know Vertex and other companies are developing second generations, try to remove the need for extra immunosuppressant treatment combinations. And on the left side, I think I'm also always interested in neuroscience, cell therapy development, given my training background. And the company, a very small biotech called Neurona, they have developing interneuron, GABA interneuron cell therapy to treat epilepsy. They try to implant all these GABA neuron to provide inhibitory signal and to reduce the hyper activated network to reduce epilepsy. And in fact, around 1/3 of epilepsy patients cannot get good control by drug only. So they have to face, very severe consequence or, cut part of their cortex, try to remove the epilepsy. So these kind of new novel cell therapy really provided interesting, very impressive results. In the first 2 patients they have treated, already only 1 injection already make them reduce more than 90% of epilepsy episodes in the last 2 years, and no clear safety concern has been observed. So the company already got IMAT designation and is likely to move into pivotal trial in the second half next year. So we hope we can see more interesting results coming from all these novel cell therapy, and they are moving into general indications, could have more impact for a larger audience for these potential patients. Yeah, if you can move the next slides.
So Jiamin, actually, before we move on, this kind of quite interesting to me because Vertex is doing the type 1 diabetes. Actually last year, if I'm not mistaken, Sanofi spent almost $3 billion acquire a company also going after type 1 diabetes, which they have a really old drug, which is like, CD3 blocking antibody. Remember one of our speaker, Francisco Leon, he was a co-founder of a company, right? So right now everyone's crazy about the type 2 diabetes, but I think type 1 diabetes is mainly immunological diseases. and the current solution or even approved drug just had some marginal benefits. Even just marginal benefits is enough to convince big pharma spend billions of dollars to acquire a relatively old drug. So I think the CGT probably my sense also including the Neurona story really is like, they should focus themselves on those unmet medical need, already kind of have some drugs on the market, but definitely have a huge gap between what the physician and patient really want and what the current drug can deliver. And then if they can leverage the advantage, it looks like it's going to be quite appealing. What do you think? So
yeah, I think one thing I also want to highlight, I remember Sanofi, right, purchase, because one challenge that Sanofi find is their pipeline is really diminishing in the diabetes space. But they had many diabetes drugs, even though that's relatively old drugs. So one reason I think they is try to maintain the diabetes sales force, all these marketing teams to feeding the pipeline. So that's the reason you probably see they are willing to pay money, a big money, even for maybe not that revolutionary drugs. But I agree, totally agree with you. I think for the CGT companies, especially I think for China CGT companies, probably also need to broad horizon, looking for other opportunities. There are actually, as Vertex showed, and also Neurona showed, I know there are many, several Chinese CGT companies really looking beyond the traditional like cancer treatment, but really looking into these novel new indications. That is the place I think could be potentially more interesting for some big companies.
All right, please.
Yeah, I think move a little bit before I move a little bit to the ADC, the oncology space. I also want to highlight the latest news in the last week's issues is the CMS has started in a novel outcome-based reimbursement plan, and also included 2 sickle cell gene therapy from Bluebird and I think from Vertex. And that is important news in my mind, because in the CGT space, we all know market access reimbursement is probably the most important hurdles. It is not a challenge in all these companies develop a gene therapy or cell therapy, but they have a bigger, probably more important challenges, because payers cannot find ways to fit their current model to fit a way to pay reimburse all these treatment, because usually all these CGT are very high cost, and also current reimburse model is not suited for this kind of one-time high cost treatment. Most payer have annual budget, and they don't know how to account if you have a CGT to claim you have a long-term, multiple year, even lifetime benefits, and how these payers can put into their own model and make sure that they can balance their budget to pay these high cost CGTs. So CMS has stepped out and provide a first access model using outcome. They say around 5 to 6 years to monitoring the sickle cell gene therapy results, and also, of course, the Bluebird and the Vertex need to rebate if the patient did not see satisfied results within these 5 to 6 years. But that is a good, important step trying to tackle the market access problems on this disease phase. Okay, so now let's move into the ADC place. As we all know, ADC is a star in the recent China cross-border deals, and there are many ADC developed, in early stage from China. And now, interestingly, I think we start to see more and more late stage results, clinical trial results, and help us to understand more new challenges. Or some of things can all these ADC really materialize their promise as we all hope to. I think there are a few high-level themes, interesting questions we face in this year, especially from some of these leading company, Topo2 ADC, from AstraZeneca, and from Gilead and also from MSD. I think the key questions we are asking is, first of all, this TOPO2 ADC using the all-comer strategy without biomarker requirement to claim that they are able to help almost every patients in that indications, especially, for example, in non-small cell lung cancer. But the current data seems to, at least first, second line, Chopin, I think that's AstraZeneca, Daiichi's Dato-DXd, did not meet their overall survival primary endpoint. So AstraZeneca actually has to fall back and start to develop their novel QCS. That's using, I think, some of these AI, computerized staining to quantify not only the cell membrane staining, but also cytoplasma staining for this TOPO2 biomarker, and using this novel biomarker to identify eligible patients. So there is a question coming on here, is how likely all these ADCs using all-comer strategy can really materialize. We're looking forward to next year to see more data on this part. The second question is, of course, the efficacy promise. All these ADCs supposed to be a target chemo, given that they have better safety. So they will have, targeted part to avoid the side effects, which also produce, a larger therapeutic window. In theory, that will give us a much better efficacy. However, in the early readout for TOPO2 ADC, both in Gilead and from AstraZeneca's Dato-DXd, they failed to meet such kind of expectation. Both of them failed in the phase 3 trial for second-line non-small cell lung cancer. So they are coming with the question, how good are these ADC? Of course, we only looking TOPO2. This is just first large wave of ADC. We're really looking forward to see more different targets, but that is an important question. And the third one, probably more important, is given all the ADC moving to a late stage, and we see an interesting question is how you use ADC after ADC. Especially, we start to see some payload cross-resistance in TOPO1, given that we know there's so many, more than, I think, several hundred TOPO1 ADC are in the pipeline, and there are almost 90 in the clinical stage. If it is true that the cross-resistance from TOPO1 ADC does exist, so that will pose a significant constraint on this later comer in the ADC space if they want to be used after, first wave of ADC establishing those indications. So anyway, these are the, I think, important questions we see from the late development of ADC, and I think that will be interesting for us to keep monitoring in the next year. Go back to you, Leon.
Actually, before I move, I know Angus, oncology is your primary coverage space in the past quite a few years. What's your view with the ADC? What do you think is the next stance for ADC?
I think there's a lot of, we've seen some, just by the way, some very kind of exciting data from Merck's ROR, I don't know how to pronounce it.
Right, 100% ROR,
yeah. Just from DLBCL, which is quite impressive. What I think ADC still has a lot to prove. I mean, we've seen the success of HER2, and that's sort of it. Like, what else can you do? Like the TROP2, we've had big hopes. Like Jiamin said, we've had big hopes for the TROP2 ADCs, but then we've seen all these failures and things not going to plan, and some of the limitations. So a lot of these are still in early stage. Encouraging, yes, but I think there's still some proving that they need to do. And we've started to see some of the, especially deal making in this field, has started to quiet down a little bit. Maybe the targets, every company has a lot. They have already found all their targets and they've exhausted the safe ones. And now for the rest, the other targets, the other deals, they'll have to take kind of a longer or closer look for them to make any commitments. I think this is something that needs to be proven in a couple of years or so. But definitely can. That being said, the success of HER2 was obviously very, very encouraging, very impressive, and also PET-C.
Yeah, I think HER2 seems to be a key driver to have these kind of big hope for ADC.
Yeah, but we cannot.
Is that exceptional?
We cannot overlook the commercial challenges. I think AstraZeneca has admitted to this. When you try to go into HER2 low and maybe in the near future HER2 ultra low, there's some education that needs to be done. Like, how do you really identify the right patients when you're trying to go into a new field? There is not a straight path forward. And we've seen some slowing down, not necessarily slowing down, but slower growth, let's put it that way, of HER2 without some of the new indication being added. So we'll just keep seeing what's going on. And there's also ADC is one thing. There are other modalities doing the same thing. Eventually, it's not ADC competing with ADCs, but ADCs versus everything else. So obviously, there's broader company. For example, in non-small cell lung cancer, there's PD-1 VEGF bispecific going on. Whether the TROP2 has its place in this, we'll just have to see. So there's a bigger picture going on, I think, in oncology beyond ADC. And obviously, there's something interesting for ADC beyond oncology. I think there's some emerging data. I think, was it AbbVie or Amgen having something in HIV? So there are some interesting things that could help ADC maybe reach beyond oncology. Those are, of course, early days as well. That's it for me.
Yeah, fantastic. I think that's a really good segue to our next session, which is really about the review of China outbound deals. We really talk about China for global deals. You know, people know I'm helping people close deal for living, so this is really my backyard. I pretty much know, like, you know, the vast majority of those deals, who did this, who was an advisor, so become quite handy. But again, I want to use this as a discussion. I know, like, Angus and Jiamin, you are not getting paid by doing something like this. So if you have any questions, please ask. I want to keep this part as interactive as possible. So this is my data set, you know, as you know, now I put my old PhD hat on my, you know, on to really tell people this is my data. That's how I got it. I got it from, you know, the press release original source. You know, obviously my data sets have way more column than this. This is just try to fit in one page. And there's a few, like a red star, really indicator for those particular deals. I include equity. Otherwise, I only include upfront payment and near-term milestone for calculation, because we want to look at the cash instead of a bio box, right? We all like serious, you know, people. We don't want to follow the PR, but follow the real money. That's pretty much a data set. With that being said, let me share with you some of a high-level discovery I have made. And, you know, by the way, the data cutoff is last week, as you can see, December 7th. And luckily, since then, until today, there were no major deals out of China. So the data is still pretty legit. And the 43 deals out of China this year with the disclosed upfront payment. And with that, what I say, the first thing I saw quite interesting, which is something I already have a sense, but this is really numbers speak for itself. You know, if you look at both deal flow, by the way, the left side always a number of deals, and the right side always the total sum, total amount of upfront payment. If you look at both, very clear, phase 1 and preclinical assay are the drivers. This is very different. You know, if you recall, a few years back, the major deals really, let's say, you know, like Beijing out-licensed their PD-1, you know, HUTCHMED out-licensed their small molecule drug to Takeda. They're all late stages, sometimes even approved asset. They were the driver, but this year is quite different. The primary driver is really phase 1 preclinical asset. If you just look at the, you know, the tally of a count of deals, that's a 70% deal. led by phase 1 preclinical asset, and almost 80% upfront payment went to those early stage assets. Quite impressive. So I look at this, when people say, I think there's 2 reasons why they have such a kind of shift from like late stage to early stage asset when the big pharma, biotech, VC go China to partnership. I think number 1, after decades of deal making, a lot of companies have a confidence in China data and Chinese asset. So they are willing to go early because, as you know, Angus, you cover big pharma, even like 8 billion looks impressive. That just is still smaller than one major M&A, right? So it's not that big. People have to put it into context, right? If you look at like a Seagen and Pfizer acquisition as a 43 billion, right? We mentioned like Immunology, number 1, merger acquisition over 10 billion. So 8 billion looks impressive to China biotech, but it's okay in the grand scheme. So now they're willing to go early because of course it costs less, and also that really play into the strength of China biotech, in my opinion. So China biotech, to borrow one of my good friends' word, he said, one R&D dollar in Boston equivalent to 10 R&D dollar in China. Probably not in Suzhou, Shanghai, probably in Chengdu. So really the cost and also the speed. So that's why I think the phase 1 asset becomes so attractive. Because in China, oftentimes, especially established modality, the first in human trial going to go way faster than the similar trial in the States. Of course, the data by itself probably would not be sufficient to get approval in the US because of all those other things probably Angus can comment. But the data, if it's in high quality, are enough to open phase 2 or pivotal trial in the US. So that's really a value really is. But of course, on the flip side, China biotech had been trying very hard to do pivotal trial, large scale trials in like developed countries like the US, Canada, European, like a West European country, and had very little success, right? So I think once you pass the phase 1, China biotech biopharma have a hard time to really be competitive to run clinical trial versus other Western companies. So I think that probably a reason, as in my opinion, that the tailwind China is cost effective and fast, and the headwinds they are not very good, and at least based on the previous data, running large scale global trials. So together, I think they found a sweet spot. So why not just give out the innovative or globally competitive asset to the Western companies, and the preclinical typically R&D ready or phase 1. Typically, after they finish phase 1A, have a little bit data from phase 1B. Yeah. I'll stop here. Any comments from you too?
Yeah, Leon, I also want to say the flip side is also very important is, as you just mentioned, China biotech companies has challenges to really run a complete pivotal trial in developed country by themselves. That causes the challenge is, they cannot raise a high price on their assets.
Right.
They have to short sell. You see here, I know it's $800 billion, and somehow, we consider definitely is still a cheap bargain for all these Western companies. They really see the benefits, but also I have to say, in the long run, unless Chinese biotech companies are able to run complete pivotal trial in Western countries to get approval by themselves, it will be hard, really tough for them to raise the price, and also sometimes they forced to sell because they have no capacity to moving forward. They have to find a buyer at this stage.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I was wondering whether this very heavy preclinical early stage weighted kind of pattern has anything to do with the funding situation in China, because there are multiple ways you could do it, whether you're going to raise extra money or you're going to license it out at this stage. One thing that reminded me was this company, Recludix Pharma, which is this Fierce Biotech, Fierce 15 company that I interviewed. They had this huge SH2 domain deal with Sanofi years ago, also very early stage deal. And I interviewed their CEO. I was like, this is a very promising project. Why did you sell at a preclinical or this early stage? Like, you could probably get a better price once you get to like phase 2 or later. But she was like, this is like, we made the best decision for the company at the time. There was a there was a biotech winter. We need to get the best deal out there so we can proceed. And they also structured the deal in a way they could get something out of the sales, not just royalties, but something, get a split from the revenue, or there is this particular deal structure baked into the deal that makes sure that they won't lose a lot of the value if the drug eventually succeeds in the commercial stage. But there is something I was wondering, because I haven't talked to any of those companies, like if this is some kind of, we need to survive, let's do this deal now, kind of sentiment going on with these big COVID one.
I think I totally agree with you. You are absolutely right. If you just look at the two China-originated success story, Legend and Beijing. For Beijing, they raised, until today, probably single digit, like low or high, mid single digit $1 billion, right? To really get where they are today, right? Multiple rounds of private, multiple rounds of public, and also equity investment from Amgen that worth like $2 billion. All those then together made Beijing today. Legend is a story. I clearly remember when I just started my company, Legend CEO joined my panel discussion. On the way, he raised the $400 million. That was not IPO. That's a full-on equity issuance. So Legend, get where it is today, also had raised billions of dollars. But now look at China Biotech, because the capital market is so bad. I mean, to be clear, it's almost impossible to raise billions of dollars in China capital market, in private capital market. No one have that much money. So you have to go to public market, and the public market, we all know, is pretty bad, pretty challenged. I think that could be the reason. And also very unfortunate, that's a capital side. Another thing is that yes, China Biotech have their strengths, but I think once you hit like a phase 2 pivotal trial, China actually have a talent gap. Jiamin and I discussed this before. Physician scientists that create a lot of value for like early stage drug development, even pivotal, even like a first-in-class molecule development is very difficult. China don't have that talent pool. China, outnumber everyone in the world in terms of medicinal chemist, protein engineer, but China, I don't think even like gonna make a top 5 or top 3 like world-class physician scientists who can really drive the trial for first-in-class molecule particularly. So I think the two things together, probably I would not say this could change in the near term future, but I do see some workaround. We can probably expand next time on this topic. We should move on. We are running a little bit behind time. So next one, it's about who gonna be the buyer. It's very important, right? So a lot of people have, assumed big pharma have a deep pocket. They kind of drive the conversation. And some people think, the new core is so hard. It must have a lot of money. Well, data speak for itself. Data doesn't lie. Number doesn't lie. What turned out, first of all, in terms of deal flow, biotech, closed as many deals as biopharma this year, right? And then if you look at the money, biotech spend comparable amount. I wouldn't say definitely big pharma still the biggest spender, but they're only 53%, 54%. And biotech 42%. It's pretty good. So I think, a lot of BD, colleagues in China should probably adjust their strategy a little bit. Don't overlook the hundreds of small, mid-sized biotech from the West. They really can help you. And they typically move faster than big pharma based on my personal experiences, right? So, and last thing, I know VC based like a new core is really a buzz this year. I think that's a really good thing, right? That's a new kind of category of buyer. I mean, they also contribute a meaningful number of deals, like 14%. But when people say VC are lean and mean, they mean it. They are lean and mean. So don't expect them to give a big check. That's their job is try to be lean and mean. But I still think that's a good thing, because like different seller have different kind of expectation. If you want to work with the VC, don't expect a huge upfront. That's not what they do. Their job is to create a value and they share the upside down the road with you. So that's a second observation. Oh, by the way, we are run behind the time. Gonna part through. If you have any question, feel free to interrupt me. We're all friends. Don't worry. So the next one is really, what format of deal making really help us. So again, if you look at deal counts, traditional BD and the licensing still dominant, right? That's like 2/3, 65%, followed by M&A, and then the new core, like I said, the VC really have something, and then R&D partnership really, I think some of a biotech in China like a Medilink, they really established themselves. So the big pharma want to work with them early on, even they don't have any asset in mind. They just feel like, wow, your technology is pretty good. I'll send my R&D people, drug discovery people work with you so we can have something. So that typically is a good sign of, the companies become mature, get recognized. So, the pharma is not their commercial BD, but their R&D discovery BD or like a partnership start to form with them. That's number one. Number two, I guess finally China Biotech have the sweet taste of M&A, owning 5 M&A, which contribute to 50% upfront payment. That's a beauty of an M&A. IPO is how to say, stop of your journey, and M&A, like one of the episodes said, is ultimate exit of biotech. Vast majority of biotech, the ultimate exit really M&A. This really speaks the volume. Owning 5 M&A, it's like almost a $4 billion cash. For like investor entrepreneurs, that's really meaningful. So I'll stop here. Anything you guys want to comment?
Yeah, I would just say M&A happening, especially I know the current geopolitical pressure place is definitely still a very good news, and provide more hopes for investors, especially for investors. I think the China biotech space really required more investment support, and that is good, news for the whole community.
I think, Jiamin, you just raised a really good points about geopolitics, right? So, people, that's another thing. People always assume US is a dominant buyer of, all those BD and M&A. Turned out it's not. Let's just finish this and then move to the last one. So now talking about like a modality, right? People always think, oh, China's really just a, antibody. We talk about CGT. Now let's just again look at the number. It's pretty diversified. This looks like a kind of a no clear one modality dominant the whole deal flow, right? I really like it, to be honest with you. Right, if you look at the by deal count, monoclonal antibody, small molecule ADC, T-cell engager, or like by a multi-specific monoclonal antibody, excluding T-cell engager, they all can have their fair share, and both like in numbers as well as the cash they made. I think that looks pretty attractive. Of course, you have to use magnification glasses to find any CGT deal this year. That's really speak of volume. What's really going on in CGT space, unfortunately. So that's what we saw so far. Another thing I want to emphasize: last year, obviously ADC was a headline. So that generated like almost $1.7 billion cash 2023. We did a tally last year. Guess what? This year, actually, our number ADC. So like Angus said, ADC have a little bit slowed down. It is, I think people may feel slowed down, but definitely not going down, right? This slowdown, they still have a little bit growth in the China space. But of course, to be fair, 2.03 billion, vast majority contributed by one deal. It's a Profound Bio acquired by GMAP. That's also speak a volume about how important M&A really is. M&A definitely trump all the other format, IPO, BD. It's not comparable in terms of a financial upside, with the M&A. So that this. Now let's go back to the question. Sorry, let me finish this real quick. Oncology is still dominant, but this year really a lot of I&I. Turned out I&I is getting bigger and bigger. I gave people a little bit context. Actually, oncology used to have a 70% to 80% of deal flow in China, out of China before. So, still China have a 50%, more than 50% in terms of deal counts this year. Way higher than the total deal counts on the global stage, but still, I think it's getting better. And of course, dollar sign oncology still dominant, but before you pretty much would never say oncology below than 80% in terms of like a total cash made. So I think that's a good sign. Now, finally, let's get to the this one. Like Jiamin mentioned about geopolitical pressure. I think that really impact the U.S.-China deal making. But guess what? Europe finally outspent U.S. in terms of getting Chinese innovation. I think this is a really encouraging sign for people worried about geopolitical pressure, right? So we like a market. You don't have a monopoly from the buyer. I mean, this is clearly there's no monopoly by the U.S. as a buyer because Europe is not one country. Europe have I don't know, at least a 10 active buyer, right? So this is a pretty good market with a one clear dominant player, which is United States, followed by probably 10 other pretty active buyers. So I think that really is something the Chinese, China Biotech or China Biopharma deal makers should keep in mind. Sometimes if people want to leverage geopolitical pressure, give you a hard ball, you know what? You can push back, right? So there's some company don't have that problem. So I think this is something this is the first time I think, probably in the past couple of years, Europe significantly outspent the US in terms of, sourcing Chinese innovation. So that's all I have with this. Hopefully that get everyone's attention and get everyone thinking what's the future going to be. Now let's probably now move to the prospects of 2025. This is a freestyle discussion. And I also encourage all the people still on call, 40 of them, drop your question in the chat box. Unfortunately, Q&A is not working. So you can join our conversation. This is really kind of a guided discussion / Q&A together. And so I'll probably start with the first bullet points. What's a major future catalyst do you think in 2025? Too many?
Yeah, I think
Maybe FTC.
Huh?
Maybe FTC. Trump just nominated his new FTC candidate. So I think we've discussed this among ourselves. Like a Republican-led FTC will be easier on large M&A deals because this is beyond just China BD or M&As, which is broader industry-wide acquisitions. 2024, at least so far, it's just been miserable. There's no major, like you have to count down Noble Holdings, Kaplan acquisition really, but that's not a drug developer, that's a CDMO. There's like no major M&A going on this year. So, but on the other hand, in comparison, the large pharmaceutical companies still need to do some of the M&As. So maybe next year, FTC changes in FTC leadership might be a catalyst to some of the deals.
Yeah,
I agree. I think next year, I think political, I would say direction setting is probably a big question, especially new FDA commissioner. As we all know, Trump's government, how much that going to change and how investors going to view the market direction will have a significant impact in 2025.
Yeah, totally. I don't have anything, I don't have a crystal ball. My crystal ball is broken. So probably we can move to the second bullet point. By the way, again, for the audience, if you have any question, please share the question in the chat box of the Zoom webinar, because the Q&A somehow is not working today. And we'll pick up the audience question. And so second is about IPO, M&A, and BD&L. I'll start, so I actually have spoken about this on multiple occasions. I truly believe this, China to West deal flow gonna continue. Several reasons. Number one, I think that the need from big pharma is real. They have not been satisfied. A lot of them still in panic attack mode. Probably Angus can confirm, because I haven't seen their pipeline really, honestly believe, can solve their patent cliff loss exclusivity yet. So there's still demand. I heard that they still have to buy like almost $200 billion worth of asset, a peak sale, revenue asset in the coming couple of years to resolve their patent cliff challenge. So that's a huge demand. And so that's for sure. And the M&A is a way, but the BD&L, they already taste the sweetness of working with the China biotech, biopharma. I think they would continue. Like I mentioned in the previous analysis, even US had a problem, European don't have problem. They're gonna keep shopping, right? Actually, they probably would be very happy that US would not come in to jack up the price. So that's one. And also, as you know, of course, some of the assay out of China may fail, just like that's part of business. Some of them are going to be successful. It gives them more confidence. It's not like a black and white anymore. It's a gray. It's really everyone have a different level of confidence. To my knowledge, most of the top pharma company already set up their China BD team, right? So they already made a commitment and hired someone or a few over there to really sourcing Chinese innovation. And then another thing is in terms of supply, don't forget this year, China biotech space got 8 billion cash, right? We already know that $1 in China, $10, $1 in China equivalent to $10 R&D productive in Boston. So imagine how much those 8 billion, not all of them going to go back to China biotech, some of them would. How much productivity they're going to generate? Last but definitely not least, I will argue the most important. Most of those companies who sold themselves, the management team still working. They set up a new company. Guess what? Now they're going to be more capital efficient. They're going to be smarter. They're going to be more experienced. For the industry, most important thing is actually a serial entrepreneur, right? So in the US, the tier one or blue chip biotech investor always bet on management team instead of asset or technology. They always have the saying, they always bet on jockeys instead of horses if they have to choose one. So China, good news, have a lot of money. There's huge demand. They have a decent number of very experienced champion jockeys. So I think all those things is a good thing. Plus the political pressure would not kill the deal flow, right? Like I mentioned. So that's my, hopefully it's the optimistic view of especially China to West, M&A, BD&L. IPO, I'm not sure. M&A and BD&L probably are gonna be pretty optimistic. Please shoot me down if there's anything making no sense.
Yeah. Leon, I do see there are some questions from audience. Just try to double check. When you count EU company as buyers, do you count all these big MNC like Sanofi, Novartis as European company, right? So that's
correct. Based on headquarters, yeah.
I see. Yeah, I think so because I do see questions, from one question from the audience asking, why European companies doing more deals than US company. I think that's probably one of the reasons is, actually there are some of big giants in European like Novartis, Roche, Sanofi. They also have their own needs to really to renew their pipeline, to really going head-to-head competitions. So I think this clarify, why we do see, I think these are major players in big pharma from European. That is a very important source of future potential buyers.
Angus, anything? Any topics from here?
Well, I think my only thing is whether, because I'm not very familiar with the pipeline of Chinese biotech, some of them very surprising to me, like the assets that got bought out. So I'm just curious, whether there is a lack of new targets or assets. Like we've seen a flurry of deals here in 2024. A lot of them already got done, which leads me to thinking whether there will be a similar ADC situation where you get a lot of things done this year and then next year there aren't that many new things that you could, shiny, bright new things that you could buy next year. So I think that's one factor, like just how many things are there to buy, especially with you talked about we have more assets outside of oncology, but still oncology is kind of the largest thing for Chinese biotechs. Like how many, and let's face it, many Chinese biotechs like to follow each other, like to crowd in specific areas. So just how many new assets are there for large companies, for foreign companies to buy? I think I'm curious to see how that plays out next year.
I'll give you a number in terms of clinical stage assay. China, Biotech, biopharma together own about 25% of a global clinical pipeline. But obviously they're highly concentrated, right?
Yeah.
So I'll share with you my personal view how China biotech compared to the US and European biotech, what's their advantage. Still, China biotech uses the word best in class. That's where they really have advantage. You know, this year you probably heard about the example actually come from one of our ISWT members company, FutureGene, right? I mean, there's a coverage of how that deal came along. TS1A, you mentioned that from AbbVie. It's probably the largest preclinical BD deal in terms of upfront, $150 million. If I'm not mistaken, the article said, you know, the company saw there's a clear need, right, for like a best-in-class assay in this space. They started doing this project, and from the time they decide to do this until they close the deal is about 1 year. And the total R&D cost is probably, I calculated after the currency transaction or the sort of exchange rate is about $5 million or less. That's how much time and money they spend and how much they got. Upfront 150. So that's a really good example. That's something I think only in China biotech ecosystem could happen. This won't happen in the US.
That's a very good example, because I also see another question from the audience asking, you know, why you know, US biotechs, for example, having more funding, top talents, hadn't been able to, you know, compete in at least in some area, you know, not necessarily all the area, but some area like TCE or other things. Yeah. So it sounds like from you just mentioned that example is their focus, their really dedicated work. Anything you can share? Just
yeah. So you take that for example. I already mentioned that, you know, the US have a lot of money, but like I said, you know, 10 US R&D dollar equivalent to 1 R&D US dollar in China. I mean, simply speaking, the same amount of money in China, biotech is in some companies just 10 times more productive, up to 10 times. I would say 3 to 5 is normal. That's how rate it is. If you look at the, you know, WuXi Biology, WuXi Aptech, from like a, you know, give them a target until they delivered R&D ready package, small molecule 1.5 year, right? Biologic is probably 1.5 year to 2 years. I mean, if you apply the standard to most US biotech, you know, I don't think many of them can really compete. But of course, this based on pretty clear bioenergy, establish a market. Like, you know, the establish bioenergy, establish the you know, ideal target product profile. So that the speed really, that's the China biotech's advantage and the cost. I mean, that's why if you recall one of the slides I showed, the modality China biotech are really good at. Vast majority of them this year is biologics, right? Some antibody as a backbone. They have a, you know, monospecific or like a multi-specific or with FC modification or conjugate to something. That contribute to like a 70% deal flow or probably also 70% the cash payment. So that's really something that's kind of backbone of it. And of course, small molecule, which a lot of people actually use to work, and the WuXi Aptech, which is kind of the, how to say, the supermarket of a small molecule drug in the world used to be. So that's really kind of the, my feeling, that's the kind of the core business, right? Base case business of China. Plus on CGT, unfortunately, cell and gene therapy right now, the market is not very active. So even like China have a 40% of CGT probably pipeline and the R&D activity, they just don't have a demand. That's why we don't see it. This is how I look at this. You know, this is also very consistent with how big pharma really pay attention to Chinese asset or like a biotech VC. They know, you know, this is where China biotech really have an advantage. Outside of it, not much, honestly speaking. I haven't seen clear advantage of China biotech in addition to small molecule biologics and CGT, you know, over US biotech, for example.
Yeah, I agree with you. I do see if there's a clear biologic reasoning pathway, and mainly, you know, more kind of, you know, hardworking space, Chinese biotech has definitely a huge advantage, working dedicatedly, determined to push projects forward.
So another thing is that, people don't be obsessed. If you just from business point of view, you don't need to be obsessed with the, have to be reading modality, new technology, new biology. There's one company called Apogene. People know where I'm getting, right? That's kind of a US biotech factory product, right? They come from this one platform. They just kind of do antibody optimization for hard target. Whenever they have a hard target, have some lead molecule, have some clinical validated data or molecule, they go IPO. So that strategy from the same group of, I would say, group of entrepreneur and investor, quite a few IPO already generated in the US in the past 2 or 3 years. That strategy is not fast follow or best in class. It's not validated, it's well validated even in the US. So I don't see anything wrong with that. As long as you generate a clinical meaningful, commercially attractive asset, I think the market would have a pretty strong interest in funding those companies. Okay, so this is really Q&A. We're gonna pick up the question. So another question. Oh, by the way, the Q&A is working now. Another question from this anonymous attendee. Typically, we don't take questions from anonymous, but this is fine. What is your prediction for the next move to differentiate themselves for companies acquire or license similar assets of a similar class of asset like a PD-1 VEGF clinical development strategy, additional differential asset for combo? Well, this is a momentum trading. Let's just be perfectly honest with you. Angus, you can disagree. You and I have been writing quite a few articles about this PD-1 VEGF saga, right? That's probably the most visible story this year with the China Biotech. For people who don't know, Akeso out-licensed their PD-1 VEGF to Sami when Sami was about to, let's say, become irrelevant, right? And that time they just failed, a small market cap. Bob Dugan was someone with a very interesting background, but very determined. Took in the asset, significant upfront payment, $500 million upfront. I believe 5 billion value in total. And turned out his bet was paid off, right? This year, Sami released quite a few data. Their major competitor, Sami's asset called Keytruda Killer, and the Keytruda owner, Merck has been kind of, poking hole of this asset for a long time until 1 or 2 months ago, Merck decided to buy one of the competitors. That was quite funny, quite interesting. So that, of course, is quite a few deal in this space, right? Akeso is number one in terms of the value. The second one probably is Biotech acquired the company Biotechies for $800 million cash, followed by Merck, finally joined the game to BD licensing with LaNova, with their just getting into clinical assay. A few patients just dosed, no data released yet. 553 and a bunch of other BD transactions. So you really have to ask yourself how big the market really is. This I think it's the PD-1 VEGF. Would this be as big as a PD-1 class? I will give this to Angus. You live and breathe in this space. You probably know better. What's your view?
I think there's I kind of suck at making predictions, but I think there's a chance that these bispecifics may be able to replace Keytruda, but there is, because Keytruda has this subcutaneous version being developed, it might be able to still hold on to some of the market share eventually. So it will still be, even though we have the China data, we still are some years apart from getting the global data. I think the doubters will keep, even though Merck bought it, they will keep poking holes in this as long as it's China-only data. It's a fair criticism that this is a global trial, and you could make all the speculations, make all the conjectures, but still you need that clinical trial to prove all your theories. So until we have that real head-to-head global trial, there's going to be arguments. We'll continue to see that going on, and it will be a few years. But definitely, the chances are quite high at this point that the PD-1 VEGF concept will eventually beat Keytruda, really beat Keytruda, replace Keytruda in the immuno-oncology space.
Yeah, on a side note, I think some of this global clinical trial will be the very important, either validation or, regarding the China clinical data, because so many eyes on this one. Can this global trial really replicate what we see from all these Chinese phase 3 data? It's going to set up the Chinese data reputation for a long term.
I agree. Yeah.
Totally agree. Totally agree. All right, I guess we run grossly over time. That's what happened when three biotechs get into the room. We three know each other too well. I just lost track of time. So thank you everyone for joining our webinar today. Before you go, this is really something, probably I'll hand to you, Jiamin, since you are leading the sponsorship effort now.
Yeah, just to let everyone aware that we are also looking for sponsorship for our webinar. So if you like it and fill out in our registration form, there's question on are you interested in sponsor our webinar? We will send out email to follow up. And if you like, you can also contact us with this email address, and we will help you understand what's the option. But I think you already know us pretty well. Assume how we can help you to raise your awareness, and also in future for our newsletters, we will also welcome sponsors, to spread the news across a larger audience. Thank you, Leon.
Fantastic. Oh, by the way, last time, a little bit quick, a shout out to our BioVerse YouTube channel. Like today's talk should be there in probably 12 hours. So you can always go to visit our previous webinar in case we misspoke or you didn't hear it clearly. It's become a very good archive for you to visit and share with your friends and colleagues. Hopefully in the future, also we can build a community around it. With that being said, this is our last episode of 2024. Has been a fantastic year for all of us. Thank you, Angus, Jiamin, and we have written so far 74 issues of newsletter. I've done 17 episodes of a webinar, and most of all, thank you, audience. We have been seeing more and more people join us as our reader or our attendees. We thank you, and we wish you a very very happy holiday. And we will see you next year webinar and JP Morgan, and you will see our newsletter this weekend. Thank you, and see you next time.
Thanks, everybody. Okay.
Okay, we're done.
All right. Thanks, Leon.